Domestic product, which is one measure of economic activity, fell 0.9% in the 3 months from April to June. On Wednesday, the US Federal Reserve chose to increase its key interest rate for the fourth time this year as part of an aggressive plan to curb inflation. Biden's urging Congress to pass the Inflation Reduction Act. He says it will lower inflation by reducing healthcare costs, investing in renewable energy and taxing the rich. Well, Mike.
This bill requires the largest corporations to begin to pay toward their fair share in taxes by putting in place a 15% corporate minimum tax. Now, I know you've never heard me say this before. It will come as a shock to you, but 55 of the Fortune 500 companies paid no federal income tax in 2020. I know you only heard me say that about 10,000 times. But the fact is, they paid no taxes on an income, collective income, over $40 billion. Well, guess what? This bill ends that.
All right, well, helping us crunch these numbers is Mike Hanna, who joins us live from Washington, D.C. Mike, some say it looks like a recession, sounds like a recession, but Joe Biden says it's absolutely not a recession. Why is he saying that?
Well, it's not just him. It's also the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, the Treasury Secretary. They've all come out and made very clear there is no recession underway. At the moment, President Biden is meeting with a group of CEOs who also agree there is no recession in place. They point to what economists regard as the most significant indicator of a looming downturn, and that is a 0.5 percentage point rise in unemployment over a month-long period. But this is not in place. Clearly, in fact, very much the opposite. Some 2.5 million jobs added to the U.S. economy since the beginning of the year. This is a very significant figure, and in fact, a rate that is too high, according to the Fed. That's why it raised interest rates to try and drive down this rapid rate of unemployment, which is causing the economy to overheat at a time where they want the economy to start stabilizing following the recovery from a pandemic period. So it's all a very complicated situation. The indicators are unclear. On the one hand, you do have that negative return in the GDP for a second quarterly period. That was one indicator of a looming recession. On the other hand, you have these amazing employment figures which completely deny that any recession is in place. But just to conclude very quickly, Neve, this is not some determinant that is made by politicians. It's a determinant that is made by a group of independent economists, 8 of them, who look at the data, investigate the data, and then determine whether or not a recession is underway. One last note, normally they do so only after a recession has been in place for a period of time.
Right, it's interesting that you raised that, Mike, because I was going to ask you how do we avoid turning this into a political decision? Obviously, having that independent body there to do that is a vital thing to have in place. But going into the midterms in November, what sort of impact would the declaration of a recession potentially have on US politics?
Well, it would have an immense impact. Any administration that went into an election presiding over a recession would be in a very, very bad situation. And Republicans in Congress are already making a lot of noise about it. They use the term recession repeatedly as a cudgel to beat the Biden administration, to insist that it's a signal that it has failed in its job. So recession is very much a political term as well. And that, as you point out, is a reason why you have an apolitical board determining whether or not a recession is in place, so it cannot be used as a political weapon. At the same time as well, this administration has been very clearly separate from the Federal Reserve, which is another body central to all of this, insisting that what the Federal Reserve does is its business. There will be no political interference with what the Federal Reserve does. So basically, it's like a separation of church and state, in this case, a separation of economy and government, to allow economic decisions or determinations to be made without any political interference.
Mike, many thanks. Mike Hanna in Washington, D.C. there.